In 3, 2, 1. Here we are. Bing. Hello, world. Okay. So welcome to this installment of Yogi to Yogi. And we'll start off with the questions that were sent in. Let's start off with these here. How does one find the right teacher and the right method or practice for oneself? Okay, Liam. So there's a few things we can say about this. It is important to find the right teacher, but it's even more important to find the right tradition. So what I highly recommend people to do is to read about the main non-dual Dharma traditions out there available today. And then say, this is the one I really resonate with. I read 3 or 4 books about their view, try to understand their view, how they see the world, how they see your own essence, and how they see the path and what kind of practices, and maybe read a few biographies and see if people grab you. And once you pick the path that you think is right for you, the overall path of Dharma, let's say it's Bumpo or Nubun or Vajrayana, one of the 4 schools of Vajrayana, Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, or Kashmir Shaivism or Shaktism or whatever, then you go in, you look at that and you go, okay, and now I know which ideology really I align with. Now I'll look for a teacher in there. And I want to point you to a series of videos we have on this on the YouTube channel, how to pick a teacher. And it takes you step by step through, because this is one of the most important questions we can ask in our life. And it's one of the most prevalent questions today. How do I pick the right method, right practice for oneself? How do I find the right teacher? And in today's world, and as it was in the old days, it may not be the right teacher, or it might be more the right teachers. Meaning you may have to go through a succession of teachers until you find one teacher who points you to your nature. That teacher in our tradition is called the heart teacher, or what's now called the root teacher. But that terminology of root teacher applied to it, which almost everybody uses today, the Mula Guru or the Tsawe Lama in Tibetan, is actually wrong. It's actually incorrect. The root teacher is the teacher who is seen as the icon of essence from your lineage. So in Tibetan Buddhism, some of the old schools, they would see Padmasambhava as that root teacher. But now they talk root teacher, meaning the teacher that pointed out the nature of mind to them. So this is a change, but I'm going back to the old way to understand it so we don't get confusing. So I'm talking about heart teacher, meaning the one who pointed you to your heart, to your own essence nature. That's really important. So we have to find who that teacher is. And sometimes we have to go through a series of teachers until we find that teacher. I went through a series of spiritual teachers and started their traditions, took initiations in their traditions. I mean, I was even in Chan Buddhism when I was 18, took 360 vows, took it quite serious and went for it with a Chinese teacher from New Jersey, only to realize, some really great stuff there, but this isn't my tradition and this isn't my heart teacher. And then I went on, looking after that, looking until eventually, boom, one appeared. So, okay, hopefully that helps you. Go to the YouTube channel and look for how to pick a teacher. It'll help a lot. I'm curious about your views on Mahayana Buddhism, mainly Zen. For example, do you think this is an appropriate path for our time, and can it be as effective as the Tantra path? Let's start with that first. So you have a 2-part question. Mahayana Buddhism was a great leap forward in thinking over Theravada Buddhism, which brought on a larger sense of the scope of activity in the world for Buddhist practitioners. It took them away from being concerned just with their own liberation and doing their own little thing in very aware but very insulated ways, into understanding the fabric of the universe is so big and broad. There's so many levels and realms interacting here. There's so many beings suffering that maybe the whole idea is for me not to go back to my pure essence, my Buddha nature or Dharmakaya, and just sit there in this vacuous spaciousness forever. But actually, maybe the game is that reverse flow is more important. How that manifests down through the energy body to the physical body. And here I am, and I'm physically manifested, and that I have a role to play here in the world. I have something to do in the world, and I have to liberate beings, and I have to be, showing right conduct and really being of service constantly. And maybe this is a really important aspect of enlightenment and the enlightenment process and the human process. So Mahayana Buddhism was very important. It gave that to Buddhism, which was great. But the Mahayana had no practice, which is kind of a bummer. It really didn't have much practice at all. It was extremely anorexic. So then what did it do? It borrowed super heavily on Indian tantric yoga. And so heavily to the point that 49% of Kashmir Shaiva's texts were literally plagiarized, wholly plagiarized, to produce the first tantric yoga text. So what is tantric yoga of Buddhism then? What is Vajrayana? Indian tantric Buddhism began as an answer to the question of Mahayana. Well, we have this new view. How do we practice? We have this new view of us in the world. Now, how do we make this expressed in the world as our lifestyle, our practice, as our expression of the fruit of the path? Oh, we need some way to do that. So then for that reason, did we lose the AC? For that reason, we need something. So they saw non-dual Shaivism and said, that's good stuff, and they just took it and they just Buddhicized it, put the introduction from the Buddha, put the outgoing thing on the Buddha, changed some deities' names, boom. But it's already been proven philologically that 49% of the original Buddhist texts of Tantra, Indian Buddhist Tantra, came directly from Shaivism. And that's only natural because they were influencing each other back and forth for many centuries in Kashmir. And then when it went to Tibet, it took on its own flavor. It really combined heavily with the Bun, the original tradition of Tibet, and even took Dzogchen from the Bun and put it on top as the icing on the cake. So what do we think about Mahayana Buddhism then? I think it's a great theory because it's tantric theory. And I think it's a great practice once you take it into Vajrayana. Practicing Mahayana by itself doesn't interest me much. But your relationship to it, your question is, what about Zen, mainly Zen? Now, here's something interesting. I don't find Zen to be very much a great example of Mahayana Buddhism. That may shock you. But what I really think from my research and discussing it with many of my teachers is that Zen is, as one teacher put it and had me in stitches, an anorexic form of Taoism. In China at the time when Chan Buddhism was developing and turned into Zen 7 generations later when it could export it over to Japan, there was a lot of interplay between Zen and Taoism. So much so that sometimes they ended up having monasteries on the same mountain. Of course, if you know Chinese history, there were battles back and forth between whether the emperor was siding with Buddhism or whether the emperor was siding with Taoism, and temples would be raised and all kinds of stuff would happen in between. But if you understand this influence of this Mahasiddha, Bodhidharma, comes over from India, this real dark guy with curly hair and huge earrings, not the earrings, right? Full-on yogin, full-on martial artist from Kalari Priyatu in India, and a full-on tantric yogin, and he's Buddhist. He comes over the mountains and he hangs out in China, and he brings Chan, or Zen, what we know now to be Zen, Chan. He brings Indian tantric Buddhist yoga, but because he can't speak the language well, and because he thinks they need something really pith, where he ends up at this Shaolin temple near this temple, Buddhist temple, he introduces to them a very deep, direct method of spirituality, right? It's based in tantric yoga from India, which infiltrated, Shaivism and Buddhism, of course, came out of those two traditions. And so here it was in China, and he's considered the first of the Zen patriarchs. He's the first forefather of Zen, of Chan Buddhism. So there, at that time, it was very clear that this was a Buddhist path of direct realization, blah, blah, blah. But the direct realization that was being emphasized was so Mahamudra or Dzogchen-like in nature that it appeared very similar to the Wu-Wei Taoist version of practice, or the fruit of practice. They wouldn't say enlightenment because Taoists don't have any concept of enlightenment, actually. But because of that similarity over time, and because things always mix over time, you had this exchange. A lot of times there was teasing back and forth on both sides. You can read in the text, which is kind of interesting. The Taoists making that the Buddhists and Confucianists were too hard-headed and too effortful, and the Buddhists and Confucianists saying that the Taoists were just like too lazy and sloppy. And, but over time, they ended up talking a lot, and very useful exchanges occurred by the yogins from each tradition, right? Because yogins always talk, right? Philosophers always argue, and yogins, authors, academics, philosophers always argue, and then yogins always talk and try to find out what's best and how to get better at what they're doing. And they share freely. So that happened over time. So over the 7 generations before complete exportation of the tradition to Japan, where it became known as Zen instead of Chan, it became more streamlined. It picked up a lot more flavor of Taoism, a lot more flavor of Taoism. So much so that I think I think it is really a form of Taoism that has a Buddhist whitewash, to be honest. It's that strong for me. Or you could say it's such a cohesion of both, or coherence of both, that revealed the essence of both. That maybe it's a new animal that's a complete hybrid of both, but easily fits in Mahayana camp, easily fits in Taoist camp. But because it's lacking, big Taoist rituals and so forth that are so important in the practice, because it's pointed so much towards the fruit of the practice, then people wouldn't really recognize it as Taoism externally. That's why one of my teachers called it anorexic Taoism, But when you see how pith it is and how much it emphasizes just the letting go, it doesn't look a lot like Mahayana. Mahayana is very inspirational, dare I say, over enthusiastic, kind of like, wow, like a cheerleading event. That's what Mahayana is like. And Zen is anything but that. It can be quite strong. You have Soto Zen and Rinzai, and they're different. One is like more relaxed side, and one is more like the relaxed Shiva side, and the other one's more like the go for it Shakti side with intensity. But overall, they're not very cheerleady. So I don't really get a lot of Mahayana flavor in Zen, right? Except for that you have one thing, the bodhisattva intent, that you're still getting realized for the benefit of all beings. But you don't see a lot of like super Zen expressions of that, where you see a lot of Zen seva organizations developing, where Zen monks are going out and just serving the community constantly. You don't see that because it's more Taoist. It's more Taoist and Shaivist, you could say, and even Dzogchen, where the understanding is, in my nature, in my realization, is compassion already complete, is service and love complete. Best I can do is realize my nature. When I do that, the external expression of it is not so important. So the Mahayana external expression of the cheerleading squad for liberating all beings is really played down in non-dual Shaivism, really played down in Dzogchen, or missing completely in Shaivism and Dzogchen, and not seen very much in Zen either. So I don't really think it's very Mahayana. Thanks for an interesting question, though. I barely ever get to talk about those things. Curious about views of Mahayana. Do you think this is an appropriate path for our time? Can be effective as Tantra? I think Tantra came out of the idea of what is most effective. Psychologically, spiritually, what is the most effective for a human being is time for an upgrade. That's where that came from. And that's what Tantra was all about. It's inherent in its own revelation, that the deities that revealed it said, this needs to be revealed now. It's a new time. This is a new methodology. It's going to replace the Veda. It's going to replace the Vedanta. It's faster. It's more efficient. We're in darker time now, blah, blah, blah. So I think Tantric yoga kind of trumps everything that went before it at that time as far as effectiveness for the modern times. That's my opinion on that one. Except, the longstanding idea of Dzogchen and Wu Wei and Anupaya Shaivism, they're great, but they're not paths of themselves. They're more fruit. When fruit becomes meditation, meditation becomes fruit. When path becomes fruit and fruit becomes path, and view becomes fruit and fruit becomes view, that's the state beyond practice. At that point, they all dovetail and become Mahasiddha. But up until that point, I think Tantric yoga trumps everything pretty much. That's my opinion of it, from practicing all these actually for a short time for some of them, but still giving them a go. I would also like to know your opinion on Kriya yoga, mainly from the Hariharananda lineage. Their methods and explanations are effective, but appear to be very simplistic. It's possible to get high levels of consciousness with them. Well, I think you only have to look at Babaji and Mataji and the examples of like Pilot Baba to know that this system of Kriya yoga is extremely powerful and effective at producing Mahasiddhas. Maybe, I don't know about this Hariharananda lineage. That might be the problem. I know that when I was looking at getting into it a little bit in 1995, I was looking at it going, this could be interesting. And I went and explored a bit. And as soon as I saw all the politics and the fighting, no, we're the ones who have the real lineage. No, we have the real transmission of the Kriya yoga. I was like, okay, I'm out. I'm out, because that just is an environment I don't want to be in. I don't want to be excluded from one group who follows the exact same practices by another group. So it's like stupid. So I would avoid all that dog and pony show if I was you, and go for the pith. And I would actually recommend Pilot Baba. I've met the man. I think he's amazing. He's actually got attainment higher than any of the other Kriya yoga teachers I've ever seen in the world today. So why would you go anywhere else? Go to Pilot Baba. He's up in Nainital, or his ashram. One of his ashrams up in Nainital. One of his main ashrams, been up there for a long time. Nainital, northern India, near Nepal border. So go up and see him right away. That's what I would think. Is it possible to get higher levels? Sure, of course. He'll blow your mind. It just wasn't my path to go that route. Another question from a different person. I've heard you speak of your many teachers and have seen the lineage tree drawing with listings of transmissions and empowerments. However, it isn't clear whether these are practitioner empowerments or teaching empowerments. Which of your teachers have authorized you to teach? What did they authorize you to teach? The whole system or only select teachings? What do your teachers think about you starting your own school, which mixes teachings from several different traditions? Good question, but there's mistakes in the question. So one of my gurus would say, the question is wrong, and that would destroy the whole person right away. But let me say it from a nice way of saying the question is wrong. My school doesn't mix teachings from several different traditions into one teaching. It's not a synergistic hybrid at all. I keep each of the vidyas extremely clear and separate, though my terminology as I describe the view might be taking on words from Taoism, from Dzogchen, from Shaivism, from Vaishnavism, from Bhakti, from Shakta, Sufism, whatever, because I don't really care about that. I want to get the point across. So, and I'm searching for the best words in English that will give the teaching in the best way. Sometimes I believe the Dzogchen writers have, especially Namkha Norbu, have just nailed the words down in English that give the view of the Mahasiddha view better than almost any other writer, speaker, and he's passed away now. But he was an amazing teacher who I got a tremendous amount of opening up to my nature from being with. So a lot of times the terminology is coming from this place where I might use, let me give an example. I won't use the word consciousness very much because that's a very loaded word in English. And the way it's been used by Indian translators for a long time is very different than Buddhist and very different than Dzogchen translators. So I don't want to develop that confusion in the students. So I tend to go to a specific set of English terminology that keeps it really clear. Because of that, when I'm discussing, let's say, Kashmir Shaivist technique that I learned from my Shaiva lineage, and I'm using words like base or your nature, view, method, and fruit, these terminologies, which are very Buddhist or Dzogchen, people are going to say, oh, he's mixing Shaivism with Buddhism and Dzogchen. This is absolutely not true and not correct. There's no need to mix. There's no need for anyone to come up with a new hybrid. I didn't do that, and I don't see any need to do that. The last big hybrid that was made is something called Bun Sarma, which means Bun New, or the new version of Bun, where they took the Vajrayana teachings, especially laying heavily on Vairochana and Padmasambhava, and they mixed them with the Yongjung Bun and came up with a new, very fresh, very powerful system. That's the last time I've seen a new system created by hybridizing. And they had to do that because they had to stop getting abused, basically by the royal patronage in Tibet at the time. Was all Buddhist, Vajrayana. And if you were a Bumpo for many centuries, you had a really hard time, really hard time. So fusing it made a lot of sense. And it fused in an area of Tibet, Eastern Tibet, where the Rime movement or the non-sectarian movement was very popular anyway. So it is an outgrowth of that time, and it was effective, and it's a very effective system. People get light body a lot in that system, as they do in the Yongjung Bun as well. But I didn't do that. So let's make that clear right away, because I get this question sometimes, and I really want that clear. So I've heard you speak to many teachers. It isn't clear where, okay. So listings of transmission empowerments, whether these practitioner empowerments or teaching empowerments. Okay, everything on the lineage tree is just, if I'm describing any kind of empowerment, they're all practice empowerments. I didn't put my PhD down there, my graduation certificates or whatever you want to call it, in these systems, because I don't have them. Nobody gets them, basically. You can go through a Geshe program through a Tibetan system. You can go through Zen in Japan and get a certificate. Japan's very big on certificates, right? You got to have your certificate. It's all chop, 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 and tons of characters and so on. I saw it from my teachers who taught Aikido and karate and medicine, Japanese medicine, shiatsu, like tons of certificates. They're big on that. But you don't see that from India. You just don't get that kind of thing from India. And you don't see it from Vajrayana. You'll get a Geshe degree, but that's like a PhD. That says you can teach, but it doesn't say anything about your attainment or your yogic abilities or anything like that. So even when you see somebody who has some kind of degree, you have to go, well, that's nice, but do you have any attainment? If that's what you want. I mean, somebody can give you a view with no attainment. Someone can explain view quite well and not have much attainment. And that's often useful. And I've made use of many teachers that had no big attainment simply because they were very compassionate and they offered teachings. And I was like, great. So no, the lineage tree does not describe the empowerments, the teaching and authorization that I got. I had forget martial arts, forget shamanism. Let's go right into only Dharma teachings now. I have teaching authorization in 2 traditions of Taoism. I have teaching authorization in what we would call nowadays, I guess you'd call it Shaivist yoga, non-dual Shaivist yoga and meditation. But when I went into that with my gurus really deep and said, but what is the textual basis of this? And this is like 5-6 years into my training. I said, I'm doing all these practices and all these oral teachings, and you're emphasizing these oral teachings, but what is the basis of this? And it was very clear that it was what we would now call in the vernacular Kashmir Shaivism. So Shaktism and Shaivism, both. And very much leaning towards the Shakta side, right? Which is more about the experience of the energy and the direct realization methodologies, and not as much on the spaciousness. But that was there for sure. But it was considered to be like what you do after. So you prep with all the body and energy practices, you enter your nature, then you understand the spaciousness of it. And then from that spaciousness to Shiva spaciousness, from that spaciousness perspective, then you go back in and that reifies the experience of the energy, and not only reifies it, but purifies it, moves it to the level of Parashakti instead of being a dualistic energy and so forth. So in that tradition that I received from my gurus in Shaivism, it was very clear that they were very conversant in, of course, the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. All modern tantric yogins of Shaivism are, Shaktism are, but more than that, the Shiva Sutras, the Spandakarika, they would quote from obscure texts as well that we don't even have now. So because I pushed them on this, otherwise they weren't big on text. It was all oral tradition. So that I have full authorization to teach everything in the system, everything, full mantra empowerments, full every practice empowerment, full. And it was only given to, as far as I understand, it was only given to 3 other people. Sorry, 2 other people, 3 total, myself and two others. At the time that I asked this question, like, who else has this? In 1996, 7, I asked this, one of those years, getting a bit old now, can't remember. And so that was clear. But it was also made clear to me in that conversation, and I don't wish to throw anybody under the bus with this, though, because my gurus told me this, that although 3 people had received this empowerment of the lineage, it's called the Purna Diksha Abhishekam. Purna Diksha Abhishekam. So I received what's called Purna Diksha Abhishekam. This was told to me by my gurus. I looked it up. There's the Maha Purna Diksha Abhishekam. That's one level above that. It doesn't have anything to do with spiritual power. It only has to do with now you are the political head. In other words, you can have lamas who are very highly realized. They're heads of their own sect and so forth, but they don't have the Maha Purna Diksha Abhisheka. That is what the Dalai Lama has. That is what the Karmapa has, to be the supreme head of everything politically. So it's a political thing. Okay, but I have the Purna Diksha Abhishekam, which gives full lineage transmission, full lineage power. I know the mantras that only go with the full lineage transmission. Sometimes people try to tell me from my same tradition, you're not really fully authorized, because my training went on not in the public. I wasn't part of a monastic situation. I didn't live at the monastery. I wasn't a monk. I was a monk for a very short time. And my teacher said, now you're going down tantric yoga. We're taking you this way. And then I had a householder life, long beard, long hair, and I kept it up the whole time I was training when I still had the ability to grow hair. So they didn't see my training very much. So they often thought I was, out there faking it, like, oh, how could you say you're authorized, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I didn't make a big deal out of it, but that's when people ask me, I said, of course I'm authorized. But that was because I had the Purna Diksha Abhishekam, which was a 10-day ceremony. I mean, it's no joke, in the ashram itself of my guru, Karna's old castle as well, up on the hill in Munger. So there's one transmission that's full and complete. 3 people got a total, and my gurus told me that the other 2 people kind of went into God realm delusions after they received the transmission. They weren't fully baked. They broke away. They didn't stay humble, and they kind of lost their minds because it was just too much energy to handle, basically, we could say. I don't know, because I've never met them. I don't know. The other thing I'm authorized to teach is the Tibetan side of the practices. So the Taoist is there, but I don't teach that often, and the Shaiva is there, and the Tibetan is there, the Dzogchen side from Bun. So even though I was authorized to teach by the Dalai Lama of the Bun, who was my heart teacher, we also had a verbal agreement that we felt it was really important, and I felt especially because he was pushing me for like 5 years solid. You got to teach. I translated a small text. He thought that was wonderful, and he gave me a transmission of some of the main Bumpo Dzogchen texts that you can possibly get. Kusum Rangshar, Kalung Gyatso, 21 Nails. Basically, I would sit with him in his shrine room. He would read the whole text to me in Tibetan. This is how they do it. It was days on end. The poor man, he was old. And then he would explain the teachings, and they would do the practices. I'd stay there for another 4 to 8 weeks, 12 weeks one time, and do the practices and check in with him. And that's how my training went. And he was taking me through all this. He took me through the 15 sessions of Ati Dzogchen. I did that over a 3-year training with him, and the text is there and so on. So I have that authorization from him. I didn't get a license. I don't have a card, a Bumpo card, a Dzogchen card, a Shaiva card, It doesn't work like that. But I don't teach it as well, actually, because we had an agreement that I felt I wanted to go a lot farther and deeper into the tradition before I started teaching it. And actually, the other most important thing is, the other part is this. I know that Dzogchen is not an entry point practice. It's not even an entry point theory or practice for people in the intermediate stages of practice. You really have to have some attainment before you go to Dzogchen. That's my clear understanding of it. We can say theoretically you can enter anytime because it is your essence, and your essence is always there in Dzogchen. And that's an argument that some people make by teaching it publicly all the time. But I don't agree. And I'm a very traditionalist. As a typical foreigner outside of a system, I want to know that system really well. I want to know I got the authorization to teach, and I want to teach it right. And what I understand from the view is, and my own experience of it is this is so profound. And every year it keeps revealing itself to me more. I don't think I want to teach it till, I don't know, some future time, because I have to find the students who are ready. Actually, this is no joke. You don't just, if you go in halfway, unfortunately, you take a student's half-baked view, half-baked, or not even half-baked character change, not fully character change yet, not pure motive yet, not 100% pure motive, not full character change, and so forth. They receive these teachings, and it becomes self-delusory, and they enter the God realm almost all the time, get hierarchical or something, and think they're having great experiences, and really don't understand the path and mess it all up. So I'm not going to do that to the students, and I'm going to wait for this. So Dzogchen for us will always be reserved as kind of the highest level training, to really wait until people are really ready for that. So in that way, I don't mix. I clearly don't mix. I have my warrior trainings. I have the shaman stuff I do for the healer types, the tantric shaman stuff for the healer types as well. I've got the Shakta Shaiva transmissions and the Taoist transmissions, and that's enough. And the Dzogchen view, the way it's written in the texts by John Mearden Reynolds, Namkhai Norbu, especially Lopan Tenzin Namdak, that is the Mahasiddha view at the highest level. So that is the view underlying all of the progressive techniques we use anyway, even though it's pointing to a direct view. So I tend to reference those books for people who want to read about Mahasiddha view, because this is basically it. I think these modern writers of Dzogchen view have nailed it, especially from the Bun side, in ways that are just hard to find. And I don't have to rewrite the wheel, reinvent the wheel. Okay, hopefully that clears up this whole thing about who's authorized or whatever. The whole system or only select teachings? No, the whole system of tantric yoga that I received from my guru. Now, here's the important thing. I received the whole system from my guru that he teaches, but then I was with many other tantric yogins, and I would study with them and train with them in mountains and then come back and talk to my guru about it. He had no problem putting it right into the system because no one can learn all of tantric yoga. It's just too big. It's too massive. So as long as you understand the view, as long as it fits with your view, it's not dualistic or something, or sorcery or something like that, then of course, this is part of the system now because I learned it with other teachers. I'm authorized, and then this becomes part of it. You also have to have a certain level of attainment to know where something you learn could fit into your system or where it could be misleading. Okay. So that's that. Whole system or only select teachings. Right. Okay. Oh, when it comes to the Dzogchen, though, again, when I finally teach, I'm not going to say I'm teaching the complete spectrum. It's just like saying you teach all of Tantra. It's just too big. People are going to specialize in certain areas. And I think that's important to understand. And again, just to go back where we started from, I did not start a new school that mixes everything. So when I was with my first Shaiva gurus, he was very clear saying, don't invent anything new. Don't create anything new. He said, you're teaching the tradition, right? And I said, yes, I'm teaching a tantric tradition. Yes, Swamiji. He goes, good, because you don't need to make anything new. It's all there. And he's right. It's all there. When I was with my Dzogchen master then as well, he wanted to know all about my previous training. So I told him all about it, demonstrated things, explained it before he started teaching me. And actually, truthfully, this is quite interesting. He was very impressed with the Kundalini Hatha Yoga that we received from our tradition. Now, I haven't really gone in depth, honestly. I've gone like halfway into the Kundalini Hatha Yoga over the 30 years I've been teaching the system. But now with this new 3-year training that we're starting, the first year of it's going to be Way of Fire. I plan to go as deep as possible. And it's really going to come out there and these people are going to really know their stuff. When I explained this system to Holiness, he was kind of blown away. He thought, wow, that's really cool. So anyway, I did learn the Bun Dzogchen Yogas, 3 systems of it from Shards and Lineage, and I really enjoyed that, and I think it's great. But he was impressed with that. But one of the things I emphasized to him, why I'm saying this, is that I told him, anything I ever learn as a Bumpo now and as a Dzogchenpa, I'm never going to mix. I'm not a mixer. I understand the beauty and power of each thing as it is, and I understand what this is, and I would keep it sacred and pure, and told him basically I completed my Shaiva training a long time ago. And now I'm going to do all Dzogchen sadhanas. And that was way back, like 2006 or 5. I started that. But I'd already been doing some Dzogchen sadhanas before that because I'd gone to trainings with Dzogchen teachers since the 90s. 1-month retreat in Bodh Gaya, a few weeks retreat in Toronto, Canada, blah, 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 like this, in Namkhai Norbu in Massachusetts and so on, way before I got with my heart teacher of Dzogchen. So I was already practicing some Dzogchen, and teaching as a Shaivist, which was kind of wearing 2 hats at the same time. But anyway, I assured him I would never mix the 2. There's no need to mix the 2, and I won't. So there you go. So I'm glad you asked that. I'm glad we could straighten it out for everybody. If you want a mixed kind of tradition, this ain't it. Okay. But my speaking, again, could make it sound like I'm mixing because the language is important and it's borrowed from a lot of traditions so that we can come up with a real coherent system of view based on the words. So we have our own jargon that's specific to this view, this school of Mahasiddha Yoga, which is pansectarian, which is really important, pansectarian. Okay? So don't get confused by the wording, just listen. Another question from someone else. Hi, how you doing, Ray? You mentioned before that the Mahasiddhas are, hope your health is well, by the way. Thanks for the blessings on my knee. You mentioned before that the Mahasiddhas are always ready to hear one's prayer request. Absolutely. I do mine at night with my foundations practice for healing of myself after I have figured out everything, though, to help myself first and also for a protective blessing power for close family. Good. But I think, especially for the healing for myself, I may be asking too much at one time, and that they will be thinking, oh, here comes this guy again with a 3rd physical problem or another thing, asking for guidance and assistance. would like your idea on this as to whether you can really push prayers too much or not. And speaking of this, you mentioned one time that you have a healing practice that you do in the morning. 10,000 thank yous, prostrations. You can describe this practice. Okay. I do plan to put that healing practice out. Realistically, it probably won't go on sale up on the website or free or whatever. Yeah, free, right? Until probably February or March, because they're just too busy right now. So sorry, I can't go through that right now, but it's quite a long one. It takes me an hour and a half when I do the full thing in the morning. I do it before I get out of bed, as you know. But let's talk about prayer. What is the proper use of prayer? Right? There's a lot of people want to know about this. This is a very interesting thing, I think, actually. Getting a close shot here. There's two ways to do prayer. Prayer is one way of opening the heart and accessing essence directly. And another way, it's asking for something. Asking for something breaks down into two categories: asking for oneself, asking for others. The most important role of prayer, in my understanding of it and my practice of it and the way I teach it, is to constantly pray to open one's own heart, mind to one's own nature. And to pray to have the realizations, like it says in our prayers, of the masters. Let it become my realization. Bless me with, so it's my realization. So that, I think, is really important aspect of prayer. First, that we're praying, not so much in a Christian sense of praying for something. When I was growing up, it was always praying for something, But this is prayer as poetic, energetic connection to your own essence through a surrendered, relaxed bhava. That's very artistic in the way you word it. So it moves you into an intuitive, subjective sense of practice rather out of the harshness of rigid thinking and so forth. It opens the heart. And as my first guru said, you get to essence through the heart, not the head. So this is the first thing about prayer that's important. So then the second part, when prayer is used to ask for things for yourself, you can. I pray for blessings. I pray for, I have prayed for blessings. And sometimes I'll pray for a dream at night from one of my masters if there's a deep question I have about the practice or the view or where to take to school next or whatever. I'll pray for a blessing dream where answers will come. And that's quite often what happens. So there's these ways of doing it. And then there's prayer for others. So the other great category of prayer is that we're praying for others. Every time we finish a practice, we chant Shantipat, or if you're doing Buddhist or Bumpo practice, you're going to chant dedication of merit chant there. So you're praying that you receive benefit, but so does everybody else. And this also can take the form of prayers for others to benefit them with prosperity, to benefit them with healing and health. So yes, there are very technologically complex and powerful methodologies in the Trikamahasiddha Yoga system for creating wealth and creating health and so forth. And is it okay to pray for those things? Well, it's really okay to pray for your health because you want to practice. Here's the orientation, right? It's all about motivation. It's really okay to pray for your health if you're praying for your health, not to just live longer for the sake of living longer, but to live longer so that you'll have more time to actualize your real nature. You'll have more time, therefore, then to benefit beings on the planet. This is important because we know, although until we get into the direct path, we know that the progressive path is what's really happening. And what limits us in the progressive path is that we are still identifying with the cachet of karmas of past life and this life, called sanchita karma, which come up in the prarabdha karma moments, situational moments. And again, we react and it reifies and limits us. So to pray for the blessings of releasing those karmas is a good prayer. To pray for longer life and health, to be able to be around long enough, to accumulate enough merit, to condition myself to not react to the secondary karmas, the prarabdha karmas, so that those sanchita karmas can dissipate and fall away as I lose identification with them. These are okay prayers. These are good prayers. But it's also very good merit to pray for others, and very important that we pray for others. I do believe that prayer has a power. What's that guy's name? Hitchens. He likes to talk about how prayer has no power and has no effect. But I would differ. I'd love to debate that guy someday, actually. Some things he says I really believe strongly in. His non-theistic approach, I really strongly agree with that. But things like not understanding the power of prayer is just simply to not understand the power of the mind. And you've got clear demonstrations and research in the Western sciences showing how the mind can affect situations outside of itself. And you only have to hang around with shamans long enough, like I've done, to see them change the weather in a moment. Boom. I'm not talking about bringing me out at 2:00 on a mountain and saying, now I'm going to make a rainbow, and doing a ceremony and a rainbow comes out, because it comes out every day during the spring at that time of the day. No, I mean, making rain in a desert and making it rain only in one area or something like that is very common. So there are ways and technologies that are preserved in tantric yoga from shamanism of affecting situations outside yourself, from health to weather to prosperity. And you're said to have a spiritual bank account, and you can use it up if you use a lot of this technology to help your health. But you can never use it up when you're helping others with it, which is the beautiful thing. So this is the way it's taught in our tradition. So doing prayers for someone else's prosperity, which I did recently for somebody, and they're doing really well now, that's okay. It doesn't take my bank of energy down, my good merit energy. I don't lose it. To pray for someone else's health is very good and very powerful. It doesn't give you less health. It doesn't take your ojas away. It helps them, though. So there is a very clear effect that prayer can have for other people, and we should try to remember to pray for others as well. Okay? Then you have a second question regarding Tattva Shuddhi. Are the pyramids or triangles inside the equal-sided square in the shape of a Star of David? Are the pyramids or triangles inside the equal-sided square? Where's the equal-sided square in the Star of David? Is there one? I don't see it in my head. I can't see. Can you guys see it? Draw it out. Equal-sided square. No, I can't see that. Okay. So let's try this again. Are the pyramids or triangles inside the equal-sided square in the shape of a Star of David? Or are they one on top of the other with the points facing up, or on top of the other with the points facing one up and the other down in Tattva Shuddhi? So I guess what tattva are we talking about? Wind. Okay. In any of these ways, we still have 10 points of light. Okay. And by the way, if all this were visualized three-dimensional, it would be more than just 10 points of light. No, actually, Ray, visualize three-dimensionally, which is how you're supposed to visualize it. So I don't know where you got this practice from, but if you're following my practice, and if you go back and listen to it really carefully, I'm very careful at making this tattva described accurately. There are 10 points of light, and we only use three-dimensional visualization. We do not use 2 dimensions, okay? So you might want to fix that in your practice. I would, first of all, fix that in your practice. So it's like this. Here's a point of light. Here's a point of light for the wind element. Imagine these 2 points are the points of pyramids, 4-sided pyramids. They go down and spread and stop at the square. It's not a square, it's a cube, right? A square is 2-dimensional. So it's a cube. On top of that is a 4-sided pyramid. On the bottom of that's a 4-sided pyramid with 2 points sticking out, like a crystal, like a double terminator crystal, if you know the New Age stuff. But each one of those points, that point, the 4, and the 4 make 10. So there are 10 points, and they are 3-dimensional, and please visualize it that way. And that's for the wind element yantra, okay? Then inside you have choice between black, smoky, black, smoky gray light in there. Light, it's not smoke. Although the old text will call it smoke, you're supposed to see it as light like smoke. So how do I describe that? It's like if you ever astral projected, everything looks like hazy black, but it's a type of light. That's what it looks like. Or you can do green. Or you can mix the green and the black light in there. That's often like that, okay? Good. So I'm glad you're doing the Tattva Shuddhi. Make those changes to it, correct it, and it'll be a lot better. Nice to talk to you. Okay, Wagner. This question is about self-realization. There is true lamas and gurus. There are true lamas and gurus of ancients, traditions, living and teaching other humans the Dharma. There are true lamas and gurus of ancient traditions living and teaching other humans the Dharma. Yes, true lamas and gurus. Hopefully I'm one of them. But we just see one or another Mahasiddha in a while. Right, correct, exactly. Supposing that there is very dedicated, and I'm not a Mahasiddha, supposing that there is very dedicated sadhakas, why is it hard to see more Mahasiddhas in one lifetime? Is it true that most of us will not get self-realization in this lifetime? If that is true, what is the next better option for one to hope to achieve in this life? Okay, this is a good, mature question. And if you come to entering the stream, we teach a lot about this as in the different destinations. So human beings have different destinations. They can die and end up in the 6 realms. They can die and end up in quasi-suspended states of non-duality, where everything is passive and there's no emotion, there's no volition, that nothing happens, very suspended. You're kind of like catatonic and you're out there forever, almost forever. There's many, many possible destinations. You can take rebirth again, right, into a lower destination, or you can take rebirth into a higher destination. Or you can achieve total realization during this lifetime, or total realization during the death process, or right after the death process. So achieving total realization in this lifetime, like a Mahasiddha does, depends on a lot of practice, a lot of very strong, willful intent to practice, to have pure motivation, to come from the right place, and to do what you need to do every time the choice comes up to make you grow. Because a lot of times people don't choose what they need to do to grow. I mean, if you're really honest with yourself and you want to be a Mahasiddha, then you say to yourself, well, do I actually take every opportunity to grow? Do I overcome whatever obstacles are in the way with me, whenever I need it? Do I sleep in and miss practice sessions? Do I not go to my teacher's teachings sometimes? Do I, when faced with a moment of character change right in my face, do I catch myself slightly skewing the truth or straight out lying and stop right there and say, the buck stops here. If I want to be a Mahasiddha, I've got to change this now. You know what? I'm sorry what I just said. It's a lie. Sometimes I have this habit of lying to cover up because I have this big ego and I want to be seen, blah, blah, blah. You know, do you have that kind of power to catch yourself out, to confess it on the spot, to change and let go and not care how anyone perceives you after that? Because you're not in the game to be seen as a great spiritual being. You're in the game to be a Mahasiddha. If so, you'll become a Mahasiddha. And saying that there aren't a lot around right now, it's actually not true. There's a lot of stage 10 beings, and I make sure that when I get photos from my friends around the world who send them to me of beings who just went through stage 10, 11, 12 process in their meditation practice, and their body shrinks and rainbows come out, I make sure to publish those pictures all the time. There's many, 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 but guess what? They don't go on the internet. They don't give YouTube classes. They don't go traveling the world giving classes and teachings. They just stay where they are and practice. Because they've reached a place where their reach doesn't need to be with you personally to make an impact. It's a whole different level of being. So it's not like the Mahasiddhas don't exist anymore. And if you have the karma to meet one, you can meet one. If you have that karma, of course. But they're still around. So don't think they're not around at all. That's important to know. So basically it boils down into 2 or 3 ideas about destination. Am I practicing in this lifetime to achieve a better rebirth? Or am I practicing in this lifetime for full realization? If somebody is truly sincere, now I'm only going to talk about truly sincere, and I'm not going to say how you measure that. You know inside whether you're full of crap or not. So just leave it right there. For the person who's fully sincere and takes Tantric Yoga initiation with a lineage teacher, even if that lineage teacher is not fully realized, but takes initiation with a lineage teacher of Tantric Yoga, Tibetan Buddhist, Tibetan Bumpo, Shaivist, Shakta, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Japanese Tantra, doesn't matter. What's that called again? The guy that came over. Oh my God, I'm stuck on it. They do like a mixture of Dzogchen practice with Vajrayana that they picked up in China. And this wild, crazy guy brought it back to Japan and really established it. It was a wild character. He established this Japanese Tantric Buddhism. It's really great. I go to the temples there. You can feel the juice still. Anyway, whatever it is that you're practicing there, if you get that initiation in this lifetime, you're guaranteed, because you have pure motive already, you're not going to give up. You're guaranteed to get full realization within 7 lifetimes. Shingon, that's it. Shingon Japanese. So you're guaranteed to get full realization within 7 lifetimes. If you're practicing sincerely, but the exploding pen trick, I always like that one. If you're practicing sincerely, but you you don't have initiation, it's not so sure that you'll get it in 7. So practicing sincerely, but you haven't sought out initiation, you have to then go find it to ensure that you're realized within 7 lives. It could be before 7, of course. But then there's the people that will realize in one life. Those are the people that go through the tantric yoga practices, get to a level where they're entering now direct realization tantra. We call the way of the Vajra. Because in our school, Trikamasa Yoga, there are actually 6 ways. We say there's 5 because I only want to teach 5, but there's actually a 6th. And I'm reserving that for students who get to that level. That's the direct take no prisoners path. It's called the way of the Vajra. And at that point, you're definitely going to get out of here in this lifetime before you die. So out of here means into your own nature. I don't want to make it like it's a dissociative, renunciate path we're on. We're not. But you're definitely going to get out of your karma and into your nature, I mean, in this lifetime, out of this karmic matrix that we all project, right? So these are the 2 great destinations. You're going to get way out. You're going to get a better birth, one of those 2. So it's important just to keep practicing right away. And remember that there are Mahasiddhas all around. And I have met 1 or 2 in my life. And yeah, if you're ready for it, it's a game changer. But there has to be that deep purity of your desire. You have to be willing to take a bullet for it. It's like this. Would you take a bullet for somebody? There's a question. I don't know. If you're coming from Europe, you might not understand that. Would you take a bullet for means, would you die for someone else? So some people answer that very easily. They would die for their child. Okay. But if it wasn't your family, would you die for someone else? That's the thing. So I always give this example of this one Navy SEAL trained his whole life, gets into the Navy SEALs, finally gets his first deployment, goes to Iraq, and his very first day out on patrol, they're up on a rooftop, and a can grenade comes over the top of the rooftop. He dives on it immediately, kills himself. This is the first hours of his life as a SEAL, a real SEAL in combat, and he dies for all of his brothers. Boom, just like that. Would you do that? If you have that kind of commitment, you will absolutely actualize. You don't have to worry about it in this lifetime. So like there's an example when Ramana Maharishi was out bathing in the Ganga, a guy waded out to him in waist deep water. And he was saying, "Oh, Rama, I just want to get realized more than anything in the world. I have this greatest intent, blah, blah, blah. How come I'm not realized? What do I have to do? I'm so surrendered to you, I want." And so Ramana said, "Do you want God more than anything else in your entire being? Do you want to know your nature?" Basically paraphrased. "Oh, yes, yes, yes." So at that point, this little frail man throws him underwater and holds him underwater. And the guy can't swim and is freaking out. And he's flailing and his air comes out and he holds him under there really long just to make a point. And when he lets him up, the guy, he gasps for air like this. And then Ramana catches that moment, he looks at him and says, and does transmission of his nature. He says, "What did you think of when you first came up? Breathing? You wanted air as the most important thing in your life, or you wanted realization?" And he made the point to the guy. He didn't really want it as bad as he said. It was a big show of devotion rather than real devotion and real commitment and purity of motivation and intention. So if we have that purity of motivation and intention, we'll get realized in this lifetime, right? And there are Mahasiddhas around. Okay. Hopefully that covers it for you. Did I lose track anywhere? Okay. And are there after effects of near-death experiences mentioned in the text? New question for someone else. Are there after effects of near-death experiences mentioned in the text? No. Texts don't talk about near-death experiences, okay? Are any near-death experiences described in the text? No. How much attention do we give to past lives? Not much. So that was easy. So, yeah, we don't really care about past lives much because what you're doing right now, what comes forward in your life right now are the things you need to work on anyway. So don't worry about the past lives. As far as near-death experiences, I've had a lot of questions by people over the decades about how important they are, and they've transformed my life. And people turn them into almost like their own private religion, where they feel like they're really highly realized now because they had a near-death experience. And I got to tell you, a near-death experience is not death. So let's get real clear about this. It is not death. You did not go through death and came back. You're not Lazarus raised from the dead by Jesus. A near-death experience is you were on your way. You were dying. You didn't die. "Oh, but I had no heartbeat. I had no brain waves. I was laying there on the table for 3 minutes." Yeah, That's not death. You came back. There was enough prana in the body. Death, by yogan definition, is when the prana leaves the body. As long as there's still prana in the body can reactivate a heart and a brain, and the tissues are preserved. So the near-death experience doesn't really count for much in the real spiritual work, actually. Although you may have seen amazing things. Now, here's why I think it's important to understand. It's a near-death experience, and it wasn't death, and you didn't have an opportunity to go into your nature and, abide there. So as you're dying, as we go through in death and dying retreat, layers and layers of ourself are receding and our nature comes to the forefront and so on. But an experience is not the same as being in your nature. So when you cling to any experience, any spiritual experience, in this case, near-death experience goes in the category as well as high meditation experience or high shamanic experience or any other kind of thing that's an experience. As soon as it's an experience, you've made it into an object. The mind is on it as an object. You're remembering it as a thing that happened. You're granting it significance it doesn't really deserve, value in your life that it doesn't need. You're orienting your whole life towards these meditational experiences or near-death experiences that says, this means I'm special, or that's what essence really is. But it isn't, because it isn't with you now. It's not here with you now. If it is, then great. And then you don't need a teacher, then you don't need a path, and you certainly don't need to write letters to people to try to get them to approve and confirm that you had this real experience. So if you're still wondering, if you're still writing about it and trying to tell people about it all the time and building a whole world on this experience, then I think you should seek out a good guru or a lama and go through the path, because something's missing. Because we're taught very clearly not to be attached to our spiritual experiences, even if it's a near-death experience, which may seem like the highlight of spiritual experiences. Acid, mushrooms, all can give experiences that peer deeply through the fabric of reality, even more than near-death experiences sometimes, because you're actually in this world as it's happening. Again, you're not supposed to do anything with those either. Swami Rujananda used to say, you take your spiritual experiences, you put them on your altar, and then you start worshiping them. They become your new God. He was so right. That example, that great New Yorker way he had of cutting through all this spiritual materialism was so powerful. We don't want to do that. So if you really want to keep growing, anybody who's caught up on any kind of spiritual experience from psychedelics or meditations, or that when you sat in the presence of some great teacher, you think they gave you Shaktipata, which is, another big problem, or near-death experiences, just forget about them. Get in the path, do the work. Stop sitting back thinking that it all happened to you when you had a car accident or something. So, you're all done now. You realize your nature, you're all done. Or don't. Or sit there and realize in your own experience that you think that's what happened. And then who cares? Because if that's what happened and you're realized already, then you don't need to run around and tell everybody about it. You don't need confirmation from other spiritual teachers, right? You don't need to find it out in texts, other than maybe it's interesting to find out in text, okay? So, yeah, our tradition doesn't talk about it very much. You know why? Because what did my first guru do? He was able to lay his body down, send his spirit out into his Atma Shakti, into another person's body that was dead, animate that body, give a lecture in that body, jump out of that body, let the body be burned, and he would go back into his own body. So really great tantric yoga masters of India and Tibet, they don't worry about this stuff because they're transiting between it all the time. They have the skill. But to get hit by a car, have a little bit of a transition, but not fully, and to not come out with the power to keep transiting would make me say, I think I'd want to know the full picture. I think I'd want to know what really happened. I think I'd want to have that under my own control. Therefore, I think I'd enter into the path of, tantric yoga, right? I'd get a guru, I'd get a system, a lama, and I'd follow it. See how that works? Very easy. No more confusion. Okay, another question or a series of questions. Ramana had cancer, but wasn't experiencing suffering as we mean it, right? He was not experiencing mental, emotional problems due to his cancer. That's pretty amazing, right? But you see that with a lot of cancer patients, and you see it especially with children who get cancer. They're pretty amazing, some of these kids. Yeah, some suffer. Some of the kids suffer. Some are afraid as they're going out. Really sadly, someone told me recently that as their child was dying from COVID, they were freaking out. The child was freaking out. And it's a terrible way to go, and it's a terrible way for a parent to see a child go, and it's terrible for a lot of reasons. We won't get into it on the political side of healthcare. But if we can There's a lot of children, though, that die of cancer that are in a kind of very blissful state of beatitude. It's gorgeous. So Ramana had cancer. Ramana Maharishi was a great saint of India who was very deeply realized in his nature. And so he wasn't experiencing mental, emotional anguish over his cancer. He was just, the body was dying, as he would say. Is suffering a creation of the function mind? Mind function. What about physical suffering? Yeah. So anytime there's mental, emotional suffering, that is mind function. That's not base mind. I mean, everything is supported and comes out of base mind. So even that suffering is an aspect of base mind, but it's the aspect of base mind where we are involved with it. Mental, emotional suffering does not arise spontaneously from essence, directly as essence. It's attenuated and changed by our own experience of ourself and our conditioning. So any kind of mental, emotional anguish is definitely part of our karmic spectrum, mind function, not base mind in our terminology. What about physical suffering? Well, it's very clear that Ramana's cancer was super painful. Very clear that he was experiencing a tremendous amount of pain. In fact, they said to him, Ramana, does it hurt? And you go, oh yeah, oh man, it really hurts. I mean, it's bone cancer, liver cancer. He had it everywhere. He would sneeze and break his arm towards the end of his life. That's how bad his bone cancer was. It was eating him alive. That hurts. Especially liver cancer is known to be super painful. So he had these painful cancers, and they said, but why are you not freaking out? Why would you ask him, Mahasiddha, why you're not freaking out, but about death? And he said, well, this is the body, and this is just the way it dies, and I don't need to resist it, basically, to paraphrase. And because he wasn't resisting it, pain was just another experience. Nothing that he needed to react to. He was fully in that experience of pain, but did not need to react to it. It was just a sensation at that point, which is, really incredible. Now, if we don't have that kind of level, maybe we have to take some painkillers so we can maintain equanimity of our mind and practice as we go out. That's always the advice. Like, you can take painkillers, but you don't want to take enough pain. You take the edge off, but you don't want to take so much that you forget how to practice and you're kind of drunk and loopy because it affects your channels. And when you die, you have a difficult time in the after-death states. But if you take just enough, the channels stay clear, but it takes an edge off so you can concentrate enough and relax into the practice. That's better, right? He didn't need that, of course. What is the difference between nidra, sleep in Sanskrit, and hypnosis in a yogic perspective? I haven't trained in hypnosis, so I really shouldn't answer that. I don't know. Seems like there's a lot of similar processes. Seems like yoga nidra is quite often, I think you're referring to yoga nidra here. You just said nidra, but I think you mean yoga nidra. It seems like yoga nidra and hypnosis share a lot in common. Seems to be, from what I see hypnosis people do. What do you call them? Hypnotherapists do, but I don't know. So I can't answer that one, sorry. Number 3, Sri Nisargadatta Maharaj got realized only by the mind. What happened to his energy body? Well, he had very powerful realization through the mind, but also he changed his idea of what realization was at the end of his death, at the end of his life, just before he died. I don't know if you know this or not. It's a very interesting thing. He didn't have the full view, the full realization picture wasn't really with him till the very end. He says so. He goes, I wasn't fully realized before. I didn't quite get it at this level. Now I really get it. And when he got it on that level, he started really moving into kind of a description of it that was very much Mahasiddha yoga view. So it's kind of interesting. His energy body was obviously, how could we say? Like I said earlier this morning, giving a talk about way of meditation and the Mind of Shiva retreat. If you enter through the mind, your energy body keeps up with the breakthroughs. But that's why Tantric yoga is so efficient, because it has us develop body, speech, and mind, body, energy, and mind. We try to bring them all along together. So the mind development, the total realization development, can be impeded by the physical body a bit, by the energy body a bit. So it's a lot harder to drill your mind so much, your weight bindu, that it blasts the blue and red bindu open and purifies them. It's kind of a strenuous way to go in one way, you can imagine. So I can't say what happened to his energy body. Nobody knows. He died in a very high state of realization. Certainly was a very authentic, sincere practitioner and taught in a very authentic and sincere way, and wasn't caught up on fame for sure, or money, or using up people, or political power, or anything. So, or sex, scandals, nothing. He was like pure as can be in this way. But he didn't practice with the body, and he didn't practice with his energy. Would he have had a different outcome? Would he have lived longer? Would he have been able to teach more people? Or if he didn't smoke every day, he smoked every day of his life because he used to be a cigarette salesman. That was his job. Maybe he would have. Who knows? So I really can't answer that one either. Sorry about that. Okay. Another questioner. I understand the left and white channels are left and white channels are the left white channel is correlated with the goddess Saraswati and Lord Ganesha. As when we do purification, left and right channels. Maybe you meant to say left and right channels and wrote white, are correlated with goddess Saraswati and Lord Ganesha, as when we do the purification of the channels. Yeah. I also know the characteristics attributed to them: soft, cool, white, natural wisdom, red, strong, no nonsense, energetic, power, dynamism, spontaneity, right? At the same time, when I sit, I see in front of me and connect with my left and right, Shambhunatha and Ma Pranashakti, and their energies, cool, calm, wisdom, and red energy. Can you kindly explain how to differentiate or relate to them, or relate them? Are Saraswati and Ganesha self are rising gods and goddesses from the source energies represented by Shambhunatha and Ma Pranashakti? Okay. So Saraswati and Ganesha are spontaneous arising awareness beings who are fully enlightened and serve the role of helping beings become liberated. And they are represented qualitatively as left and right channel expressions, right? Although they're complete in their own realization, of course. The same is said of Ma Pranashakti and Shambhunatha. Exactly the same. Okay, really. At this point, it can be like splicing hairs, But when we think about Shambhunatha and Ma Pranashakti, we position them often more as symbols or icons, more of the direct essence before it has gotten into more flavored expressions of, like, say, 10 Dashamahavidyas or Ganesha Saraswati. So yes, in that way, you're right, in that we tend to reserve more of a Shambhunatha and Ma Pranashakti expression for more icon of direct essence expression as left and right, or red and white. Okay, great. Another question. In light body prayer, wisdom light is one's own loving awareness. But how then are wisdom and compassion different? Or are they the same? Are they inseparable, like Shiva and Shakti? Yes, wisdom and compassion at some level of experience are absolutely identical. Two sides of the same coin. You have one coin, you can look at two different sides, but you can't have one of those sides without a side. You basically can't do that in 3 dimensions, right? So it's the same way with wisdom and compassion. We cultivate wisdom, and that brings compassion. If you really cultivate wisdom deeply enough, you get compassion. If you really cultivate compassion deeply enough, it brings wisdom. This is very important to understand. The right and left channels are part of one unity. We only take them apart because they have an expression that way in our living being, but we also take them apart for pragmatic reasons so that we can actually work with them and bring out these qualities. But we're never saying that they're inherently not fused. So inherently, primordially, wisdom and compassion are one. They're fused. There is only one reality, one Shiva Bindu, one, there's a Tibetan term for it in Dzogchen, one sphere, right? Jig, sphere. So there is only this one on one level of understanding, but this one manifests continually as all of this. So wisdom and compassion are seen alternating, in our bhava, in our experience, until we are resting and abiding in our nature so completely that it's impossible to differentiate between what is wisdom and what is compassion. That's where we're heading. Until then, we like to try to work with what is wisdom, what is compassion. And wisdom then tends to come through the white bindu, mostly in our experience of it, as the experience of that which is not temporal. So when we have the mental experience of that which is not temporal, when we're accessing our nature through the mind channel, through the white bindu, etc., this is wisdom. when we are accessing our essence through the embodied experience or the expression of power, of energy, of dynamism, of passion, of being alive, of love. Because all those passions and the energy of life itself is based on the pure energy of the universe, the Parashakti, which when it manifests is kind of compassion and dynamism. Love in its essence manifests as compassion and dynamism. So in that way, when we take that approach, we're experiencing our essence through that avenue, through that way, right? So compassion is there. But if we're working the compassion at a very high level, and remember, you can't have compassion without passion. Namkar Norbu was very big on this. He's like, look, if you're having limitations on your passion, if you have a lot of resistance still, you're uptight, you're very analytical in your mind, you're too uptight, you're a bit crusty, sexual abuse wounds, cultural repression, suppression, conditioning culturally, religious society, whatever, you're a Puritan in some way, or you're very anal, or you're very mechanical engineer-y type, whatever you want to say, not so artistic and wild. That stuff has to be opened up in the Red Bindu. That's why we have the Red Bindu trainings. That's why we have Trika Masada Yoga and Trika Psychology. Now, I highly recommend the Trika Psychology cohorts for people that are going through the practice in the path, because you get to unearth all of this deeper stuff. Oh, I did my psychology. Think again. Your psychology is going to go with you all the way through the whole path. We really want to transform it, right? So if you go deep enough into that compassion, into the passion, deep enough to touch the non-dual aspect of it, it becomes rectifying even to the white bindu. The way the white bindu, if you go deep enough into it, becomes rectifying to the red bindu. But in this incarnation, because we're all human incarnated, we really get hung up in the red bindu a lot. That's where we have the most problem in today's culture, today's society, like the past few thousand years. So it is very important to clear out those obstacles in those lower areas. And that's why we have what we call the yoga systems. Hatha Yoga is designed for that. Kundalini Hatha Yoga is designed for that, as are the sexual practices, as are the warrior practices. All the physical, energetic practices are very important. We clear that out. We rectify and balance all those. We open up those tight, what they call bandhas, the tight locks, grunties, knots. They call them all these different names. And we open them up. We explode them. That energy comes out. And then that energy is in circulation in our being, able to feed us and nourish us. Compassion then reveals itself as wisdom, wisdom as compassion, and yet we can still appreciate the play of the two back and forth without having to say one is the real thing or that they're separate. No, they're really like this, but they're in a dynamic dance with each other, right? That's like when we do our Shantipat mantras at the end we do the mudras like this at the end to show wisdom and compassion are always co-circulating, re-arising, going back to pure essence, indivisible, coming out again. But they never lose their non-dual essential unification or original indivisibility, okay? Where can we turn in our material world to experience wisdom? Your mother? No. I wish to surround myself with wisdom, but I find it so hard to find these days. Yeah, no jokes, all jokes aside. Yes, it's very hard to find wisdom today. And yes, everybody wants to have some wisdom around them. A kula of a family of great practitioners that understand wisdom. This is all really wonderful stuff. We would like to have that. All we can do is hope for the best and pray, and pray for a good group of students gathered around a good set of teachings coming through a lineage authorized teacher, that kind of thing. But you'd be surprised. You can find wisdom in some unexpected places. I often use this story that I went from New York as a kid to study in Iowa, my last 2.5 years of chiropractic college and physical therapy and Chinese acupuncture and all Japanese acupuncture, all the stuff I did out there. And I was amazed at the wisdom of farmers. I'm not saying this to be cute at all. I'm telling you that the farmers I met, I think, are far wiser than 80% of my students who study the view and do the practices, because they have such a level of integration on a day-to-day basis. And the ones who were Christian tended to take not this fundamentalist view, probably because they were so connected to nature. They saw much deeper. And we would actually discuss these really esoteric passages from the Bible when they would come in and see me. But I was just blown away by their wisdom, really had developing wisdom. So you can find it some places you don't expect. My grandmother would come and drop bombs every now and then of wisdom. I'd be like, dude, that's amazing. So it's around. Of course, we'd love to have it with the Kula. And that's, hopefully what develops here in Costa Rica is developing now, and in Maine and anywhere else we end up. Okay, another question. How can different forms, how can different art forms, thank you, visual arts, poetry, music, and others be used by 1, artists, 2, non-artists, as sadhana and as a way of releasing habitual patterns of body, speech, and mind? I like this question a lot. I've answered it a lot, especially for Brazilians. I was just discussing with a student here from Brazil that Brazil tends to put out a lot of right-brained people with a lot of art talent. A lot of my students from Brazil just blow my mind. They can sing, they can play guitars, they can dance, they can sculpt, they can paint. They're amazing. And that's, part of the problem with Mediterranean cultures. They're a little too red bindu. They got to work out that white bindu a bit more, get some control on all that stuff. But no, all kidding aside, again, how can we use this? Well, Abhinavagupta was very famous for always sitting with his Veena when he was giving teachings, and having 2 Shaktis with him, his 2 Dutyas, his consorts that were his. You could say he was monogamous with these 2, if there's such a thing. Dimogamous, I don't know. And so he had this Veena, and he was always playing music and composing, spontaneously composing, letting his experience, as he'd sit in meditation, he'd be playing, literally playing as he's sitting in deep meditation. And the words would then come out as beautiful shlokas describing the state he's in. And when you read these and hear these, I remember putting myself, or him putting me into deep recognition of my nature, just reading. I was meditating and I would read his stanzas and I would go, oh my God, it would just blow me away. And it would just take me so deep. It was really interesting. So can we use art in all its forms to take us in? Yes. It's meditation that uses the body, meditation that uses the energy, right? The mind part, sort of there, but you're using these other gateways. You have to be really good, though. You have to really know how to. Good doesn't mean you have to be great at your art. You have to be really knowledgeable on how to surrender into it and let that energy of the art take you there. This is the important thing. Very hard for people to understand this. This goes for visual art, martial arts, music arts, everything. You've got to do the training in the art first. You don't have to look so good at it or be the greatest recording artist ever, let's say musically, but you've got to do the training first, so you then have the necessary skills and vocabulary to be able to speak spontaneously through that art form. I've played guitar my whole life, and you'd never know, because as soon as I let it go for a few years, I go back to bass beginner again. I can just jam out some punk rock. I lose all that good fusion and jazz training I had with really good masters of jazz in the East Coast at that time. I trained with some of the best, actually, truly. And I feel sad that I wasn't able to bring it to a higher level. I don't have it in me naturally. I love it, so I do it for myself. But I couldn't say I could really express essence through it. But I can do that with the physical arts I've done. And I can do that with my voice, right? So you have to train long enough in your art form, whatever it is, so that you're so deeply in it that you can learn how to meditate into the practice of it, so that you're in a non-dual state, in a non-conceptual state, and yet the art form is still being expressed. This is how we have to use it. This is how we use the arts. And then they are, and I'm going to say this with pulling no punches, they are equal to sitting in meditation. Then one need not, for my foreigners, you don't need to sit in meditation. If this is your way and it's working at this high level, you don't need to. You may want to later when activity feels like waning and you're a bit older. There's somebody who used to express this state very well, named Miyamoto Musashi. He was the greatest swordsman ever in the world, period, that we know about. So he would just challenge people with like an old stick. He'd pick up a stick along the side of the road. He wouldn't challenge people. People would challenge him a lot, but he challenged people when he was younger. But he would be walking to a match, which was preset. Someone challenged him. He didn't have a sword sometimes. He'd just pick up a stick, literally a stick on the side of the road, not like a wooden shaved sword, a stick. And he would beat the crap out of the person or kill them with this little stick he just picked up on the side of the road versus a full samurai blade, which was no joke, right? Now his path was the warrior path, and he was a spontaneously realized being who spent his life trying to figure out what he was doing. He spent his life trying to figure out how doing his art came natural to him to where he was unbeatable. He was literally unbeatable because he was in such a state of essence and presence. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to be the greatest of artists to actually be in a state of presence, but in his case, it was exhibited this way. But as he got older, to talk about my point of sitting eventually, he eventually gave up the world, went to a cave, and tried to write down what he knew, which today people still don't really understand and can't use as a real guide. In fact, his school is known for, sorry to offend anybody, but his school is known for swords people who aren't that good because he was teaching something that was just so far out. He was spontaneously realized. So he sat for the last few years of his life in meditation all day long until he died. An earthquake happened, flowers came out, the typical signs of someone who reached stage 10 in their death. But he was sitting for a lot of that he wasn't practicing sword. He was sitting for about the last 10, 15 years of his life, or 10, 12 years of his life, mostly, and especially the last 3 years or so, sitting at this cave. So, but most of us are going to have to learn step by step in art and go all the way through that art form, throwing pots, Zen style, whatever it is, whatever your art form is, painting, whatever, martial arts, dance, singing, whatever. And then we have a vocabulary to express this energy when it comes out. It's really beautiful. You see this in the fight game for some people who are very good at martial arts in this way. And then they're in the state of meditation, and this was the goal of the samurai. When a samurai is on the field of battle, you don't think, oh, I'm in the state of essence, therefore I'll never lose. Somebody got to lose, Two guys with a sword. Somebody's a shish kebab and someone isn't. That's all there is. That's the only result you can get from that. Maybe they both can die, but usually one dies, the other one lives. And that's just the way it is. If you're on a battlefield, they can stab you from behind as well. Like it's every person for themselves. So, and I say every person because women were on that battlefield wielding what are called naginata, very powerful swords on the end of long sticks. So they were part of it too. So you didn't expect to live. That wasn't winning. Winning was being in the state of essence while you were fighting, being in your nature of your essence, being your natural state while fighting. So that even if you died, that was a result of following your nadi. You were a warrior. And even so, the samurai would leave incense in their helmet. So if their head came off during the battle and the helmet popped off, it would give a scent as an offering to their opponent. Now, whether you could really smell it in the middle of a battle is neither here nor there. The point is that warrior that they prepared by putting incense in their helmet, in the very top of their head, so that if their